So I want to talk about the design process. This is the process that you're going to use to design your application for this class and in general. So these slides are here at this URL. You should go there and so you can follow along. I also want to plug in. We have a whole class, CSE 572, which deals with design, human-computer interaction. And so I highly recommend you take that class. It's a whole class on design. So first, I want to give you some references. This book right here, you can click on it. It's a good reference. It talks about design. It talks about the design process mostly, and by that I mean, how do you talk to your clients, how do you get your requirements, and how you put these together into the design. I think as developers, most software developers, most students think when they hear design, they think, oh, that's about picking the right color or deciding where to put the button, and really that's sort of the end thing. But most of the work it deals with talking to your clients and figuring out what is important, and this book really gives you the step-by-steps as to how you do that. So check it out. You probably want to read that. In terms of the actual designing, figuring out how the user interacts with your software, this is called interaction design, and this is a good book to read on that specific topic. Another good reference is this website, the Encyclopedia of Human-Computer Interaction. It's not an encyclopedia, but it's really a website with a lot of awesome articles. This one is smaller. The Hack Design is another website that gives you actual tips as to how to set up colors and how to set up your forms, etc. Finally, here's a video from the Google people. This is a user interface design for mobile developers, so it does focus on mobile, but it's a really good short intro to the basics that you need to know as a developer for doing design. And again, you should click on it and watch the video. So who are designers? Designers are the people that determine what the product looks like, what it does, and basically what is important about it. This right here, you might have seen this guy here, Jonathan Ive. He's the big designer at Apple. He designed the original iPod and the original iMacs and a lot of other products. So he comes from industrial design. So in industrial design, you design the hardware. So that's what Apple focuses on, designing the hardware for the phone. So in our case, we're doing mostly software, but still some of the same things apply. So there is a really fine line between developers and designers, as I point out here. You will be doing design as a developer. You will almost certainly be doing a lot of design, meaning you will be making a lot of decisions. You will decide what the button says, where the button is placed. Is that a drop down or a checkbox? What colors it is, maybe. Many times you will be making those decisions simply because that's what you do. If you're working for a very big company like Apple, maybe they have money to hire somebody who specializes in making these decisions and doing that. But like, chances are that's not going to be the case. You will be making these decisions. And if you make them correctly, if you make your program, just a little bit nicer to use, people will like it. People will think that just because your program looks nicer, that it actually is faster and works better. And there's scientific evidence for this. So you should learn a little bit about design and not just put things down the first way you think about it, and you should carefully think about how to put things in your application, how to place things, how the flow works. So it's a little video on him. You can watch it if you want. The field is, like I said, there's interaction design, which deals with how you interact with your computer, and the HCI, human computer interaction term, is like the umbrella term. So under HCI there's a lot of subfields, different people working on it. So ID, or interaction design, is a subset of HCI. And the easiest way to think about this is in terms of science and engineering, right? So you know that engineers use science, right? So you have chemistry and physics that tells us how materials work, and engineers use that to make skyscrapers. So in terms of software, we can think of psychiatrists, psychologists, cognitive scientists, and all these people who are doing experiments on people, figuring out what they find more natural, more easy to use. And they publish all these papers and on reaction times, on how people's attention vary, etc., etc. And then the designers come in and read those papers and use those to build better interfaces, user interfaces. So this is sort of the science. And when you go in, like in university, a lot of the HCI people, this is what they do. They do experiments on people, try to figure out, what's the best way, or how long people take to find a text in this thing, or etc. And then the designers will use that to make better user interfaces. So the design process. This is the process that you're going to go through in this class for this project, and in general, the process you should go through when making a project. The first thing you have to do is do your research. So you need to figure out how the business works. This is a very common problem. You go in and it's like this, medical devices, and you don't know anything about medical devices. So you need to do some background research, figure out, learn a little bit about the business. Then you need to identify the various stakeholders. So these are the people that have something to gain or lose from the software. So your users are clearly one, right? So you figure out who is actually going to use my software. That might not be the person you're talking to, of course. Many times it's not. There are also other people, marketing in a company, the people who are going to sell your software. They're going to be important, right? Because they know about the customers and they know what features they want. Sales, similarly. You might have to talk to engineering, depending on your software, might have to deal with some hardware, interface with hardware. So you might have to talk to them about what is and is not possible. Then, executives, other product owners who might have some ideas about what your software should do. Expectations, you need to figure out what their expectations are. Basically, there is always a trade-off between functionality, timeliness, and reliability, and cost, etc. Right? So you can deliver it fast, or you can have a lot of features, or maybe they need it to be super reliable but don't care about how long it takes, etc. So you want to figure out what the trade-offs are there for them. And the main thing you want to ask them is, after you do all that, you ask them what are the actual problems and that they're facing. What are their pain points? So a common thing you will find when talking to a client is they already suggest to you a solution, as our clients do. They're like, I need this app built, and they tell you sort of what it should do. But you obviously want to listen to that, but at the same time, you want to go back and ask them, why do you think this is the right answer? What is the actual problem that you're having that you think this is the right answer? Because maybe you can come up with a better solution that than they can and than they think. So don't just take what they suggest as the thing that you have to do. You can work with them and come up maybe with a better solution. So why do we do this? Why do we do all this? Because we have this general relation that as time goes on here in the x-axis, the benefits of talking are really high. So you want to talk to your client at first because you don't know anything at first, so you definitely want to talk to them and get as much information as you can, and then not do any programming yet, right? So then as you start making your design, figuring out how things go, you learn everything that you have to know, so there's less benefit into talking to them, and it becomes harder. As you see over here, it becomes harder to change your design, right? So now you have a big design. it's gonna be harder and harder to change it. So if they like, if you have a big change at the end, you have to throw everything away and start from the beginning, and you don't want that. So data gathering is what you're gonna do. Like I said, when you go talk to them, there are many different, at least 3 main ways of getting information from your clients. You can interview them, which is you're definitely going to do. You're going to go talk to them, listen to them. You want to ask a non-leading question. So when you're interviewing, listen. That's the key thing. Don't assume that you know what they're saying, or don't assume. Do not interrupt, and just let them tell you what they need, what they want. You can also have questionnaires. This is when you're building something for, say, a lot of people. Questionnaires is hard to write, but you can reach a lot of people. So you can get when you need an app that's gonna maybe reach thousands, millions of people. It might be a useful thing to have questionnaires. Use questionnaires to figure out what it is that they actually want on average. But really the best way to do it is to observe people. So when you're trying to solve a problem, people have a pain point, and you want to go and observe them, look at them working and see what they're doing. That way, because people will, they will lie to you, not because they're mean, but just they forget, or they want to look better. They don't want to admit that they don't know how the computer works, etc. So when you observe them, you can see what it is that they're actually doing, how they're using the post-it notes or the Excel spreadsheet or whatever to automate their process, and that is the truth. And you can use that to maybe build a better design. So when you go to your interviews to interview your client, I guess a lot of students sometimes don't know what to ask. So here's a list of questions. So again, the URL. You can go through these questions and look through them, and make sure you know the answer to all of these by the end of your interviews. So here's a little example of a company, maybe the one you're going to talk to. This is the UTI Supply Chain Solutions. And it says right here, UTI focuses on client-centric solutions that are configured to most closely fit our clients' businesses. So now I know everything I need to know about them, right? Not really. So all I know from this is their about blurb is that, we make custom solutions. That doesn't tell me anything. So can I go to them, if I need have a dress and I need it fitted, can I take it to them that, customize my dress? Probably not, right? Because they're not tailors. So you have to read more about what they actually do, and figure out that there's a supply chain, and maybe you probably don't know what a supply chain is, right? So you got to do some research, figure out what a supply chain is, how it works, and what the companies who say they're in supply chain solutions do. So it's a very, this is what they might tell you. We're a vertically integrated customer tracking solution, which is also in their website. Again, that doesn't tell me much. So there's this language problem, right? You have to know where they're coming from. They're going to make all these assumptions that you already know what these things are, supply chains and similar. And if you don't know, you need to say, hey, explain this to me, right? So hopefully you do a little bit of research beforehand, so you'll know some of those answers, but you're still not going to know everything. So when you're talking to them, if they use a term that you don't know what it is, ask them, what do you mean by that? What should we do in this scenario? How does it actually work? Can I see it? Because that's how you learn. And I think many times students, are intimidated perhaps, or they just don't want to speak up and just stay quiet. That's the worst thing you can do. Ask questions. It's not going to make you look dumb. Asking a question makes you look smart. You're going to engage them. They're going to say, hey, this guy is asking me questions. He's asking me good questions. And plus, I love to show off how much stuff I know. So I'm going to explain this to this person. It's going to work out. Don't worry. So ask questions. Mental models. So we all have these mental models that we use as humans. And one of the things that you do as a designer is try to build upon those mental models, right? So here's a common one. Let's say in the winter you arrive at your cold apartment and you wanted to get it warm to like 70 degrees Fahrenheit as fast as possible. What do you do with the thermostat? So you might say, well, I'm just going to crank it up to 100 so it heats it up really fast. So your mental model there is wrong. You're imagining that your thermostat, controls how much heat goes into your house, proportional to, the difference between, the final the temperature you set it at and the current temperature. So it's sort of proportional to that. And this is a very common wrong model that a lot of people have. So, you as a designer, you have to work with this. You have to understand the various models that people have in their mind already and try to leverage those models, or try to build new models for your software. When you're building a software, you try to build models, but these have to be really based on current models in the world. This is this video here on the right. You can check it out. It's a good video on those mental models. And this is a fun video on asking people what a browser is. So people have the average person doesn't know what a browser is or how it works. So their model for a browser is you will find surprising. This is another video which you might want to see. So in 2004, Google introduced material design. So in 2014, a material design. And it's based on the mental model of moving little bits of paper around. So in this video, they talk about that, how their material design is based on moving materials around. These are actually little cards. That's what they talk about, and they're transparent cards sometimes. And they leverage our inherent knowledge of physics, of how paper and transparencies work, to make the design easier to use. So check it out. Okay, once you get your set of responses, say you did a survey, you get a set of responses, you're going to analyze it. So you're going to determine the features that you're interested in, basically the goals, frustrations, skills or objects, mental models, demographics, etc. So what are the things that you are interested in this world that you're dealing with in this problem? And then you're going to do coding. This is not what you think. This is psychological coding. So you're just going to say each feature, each frustration, let's say. So each time a person said, this is annoying, I hate this, this drives me crazy, you're going to mark it with a number. So this is frustration. And you can say frustrations are 3. So each time you see that, you get a number 3, 3, 3, 3. So this guy, I saw 3. Maybe another interview, you didn't see a frustration, so he doesn't get a 3. And then at the end, now you have each interview coded with a bunch of different numbers, each one in different parts of the interview. And then you can organize it and cluster and find out what the people are. So this is if you had done an interview, this is or a bunch of interviews or a bunch of surveys, and you have all these data from different users, how you might organize it. And once you do that, then you can create a persona. A persona is something that you will be doing for this class. You will be creating these personas. A persona is just an archetype that describes just a sort of a basic user, a general user of your app. It doesn't have to be you want to have different personas for different users, right? So let's say you're building a restaurant app. So you might have one persona which is a student looking for cheap food. Another one might be a mom looking for a fast and healthy food. Another one might be a gourmand, and the kind of person that takes photos of all his meals, and he's going to use your app. You might also have a businesswoman who's on the company credit card, so she might use your app in a different way. So that's the idea, right? So you're building a restaurant app and you build these personas. These are, there's not a typical user. So we're not going to have a typical user. We're going to have multiple ones, and each one is sort of typical for its group, I guess, but it's going to have different needs, right? So you want to gather those and build these personas, and you put them together into a little profile here. This is how a little persona might look. You grab a picture. You want to have a little photo of them. You want to give them a name that's realistic. This is not obviously the real person is all made up, but you do that. And then you describe the person, how old they are, what they do for a living, and something about their background, hobbies, etc. And the goal in terms of using your app, right? So, or your website in this case. So that's a persona, right? And why? Why should you do this? Why do we do this? So this is part of the design process. It's one of the first things we do. And the first reason we do this is because it helps us communicate the user needs amongst the people in your group, right? So when you might propose, let's have it saved to Google Drive, then, somebody might say, oh no, well, Bobby would be confused by that. Bobby being one of your personas, and maybe Bobby is not that good with computers, so he has no idea what Google Drive is or how it works. So that's the kind of thing you do. So K-Theme is too busy to read all that, and Bill will use that feature a lot. These are some of the things you might say once you have the personas. So they really help you focus, think about real users who are not you, right? So this is the second one, and this is very useful when it comes to, I think, beginners, students in this class, that they all tend to think only about themselves and how I would use this app, and I don't like that. I think that is annoying. When you're writing software, you're not writing software for yourself. Most of the time, you're writing software for somebody else, and it's hard to remember that all the time. It's hard to make something that you find, unappealing, but you have to, right? You have to think of other people, how they use it, and build it for them. So having personas really helps you remember these things. You can also use it to explain to your customer why you have a particular feature, right? You say, oh, well, Bobby would like this feature. And he will understand that, that means that there'll be all these people who will buy the product because they find it useful. And so we remind you that users are individuals, right? So we don't want, none of the personas should be like an average, sort of bland, average height, average everything. They should have, interest or something that puts them, separates them. There should be an actual person to remind you that everybody's different and there is no average. So, okay, once you do that, you're gonna have put together some design requirements, right? So these are not specifications. So you have something like quickly send email might be a design requirement. So we want the app to be, the user to be able to quickly send an email. That doesn't necessarily mean that a button has to be there. That's called send email, right? That's a decision later on. The requirement is just some way of quickly sending email, just some way of doing this, some way of getting that done. They also need to talk about the product quality, the experience attributes, and the constraints in terms of the time it takes, the cost, the load, the response time, platforms. Right, so basically this means, how polished do you want the product to be? This is going back to the trade-offs between good design and having it done quickly or under budget. The experience, how experienced do you expect your users to be? Is this something that an app that's going to be used once a year or once an hour, right? So it's very different if you have something that is going to be used all the time versus something that is going to be used just once a year. It needs to be designed differently, right? Because people, if you're using it every hour, you need to be fast, you need to have it be fast, you need to not be annoying, and people are going to be become very well acquainted with it. Whereas once a year, you totally don't remember you ever used it. So it's a new thing every time. And similarly for the constraints of time, load, response time, etc. Now you also, once you have the personas, you develop scenarios. So scenarios is a little description of the future, right? Based on the persona. So you say you have a persona called Tom, the Gorman, and you write a little story. The story is not just about how he uses your app, but a little bit about background, what he's doing, and sort of why he's using your app at that time. What does he need done? It's important to have that. You can also put this up as a little storyboard if you want. So draw a little comic book based sort of, start showing him thinking, and then how this is your app, and then how he's using it to deal with his particular problem at the time. So these are good to set up the various use cases. Is another way that we call them in programming. Then once you have those scenarios, you can go ahead and start working on your rough mockups. This is another thing you're going to be doing for this class. Just use pencil and paper or whatever you want, really, but pencil and paper is really best because it's very quick. Usually you want to use a lot of little notes. Sort of each one is a screen of your program, and just draw the user interface on it, put them down in a big table. It's very easy to have many of them and scratch them away and throw them away and put new ones together. So you want to focus on the overall layout, how the various screens talk to each other, and how the screens all look alike, right? So what is common among them so the user doesn't get lost. You want to fulfill the major requirements of the app. So you want to make sure that the big things that the client needs done get done in a quick manner, in an intuitive manner. And you want to have a cohesive look to your whole app. So this is the first thing you're going to do, your rough mockups after you do the personas, etc. And usually you want to come up with various different ways, at least a couple of different designs. So like completely, this is one way we could do it with these set of screens, and there's another way we could do it with these set of screens, right? So maybe you want to show that to your client, have them decide, or maybe you decide, depending on the situation. But you want to do things differently, right? And it's also good to have everybody should do one, right? So that way you can, and then you meet, so you do it independently, then you meet together and you show each other how you went about it, and you will find, this is pretty cool, you find that maybe this other person in the team, she did it completely different from what I did it, even though I thought mine was the only possible way to do this. Here's somebody who did it completely differently, and you learn that people are different. And then you have to figure out which one is the one you're going to go with. So that's fun. So once you figure out which one you're going to go with, then you can do another, a bit more formal mock-up. This is still, a sketch. So there's these tools online, Balsamiq, Mockflow, that basically let you draw stuff that looks like this, or, like this. These are mock-ups. These are not final, right? They're not meant to look totally realistic, but they are, they do let you specify, specifically where things are. They'll let you worry about the text size. If you're doing a mobile application, you have to worry about buttons and how big the buttons are, because you can only have so many buttons on a phone, or, of course, even in a desktop, it's the same problem, but especially bad here. So you start to worry about how many things can I fit, readability and touchability issues. So that's another thing you're going to do, is a final mock-up for your app. And that's it.